So welcome to today's webinar, One Stop Shop with HubSpot. If you're not sure what HubSpot is, you're in the right place. It's a constituent relationship management or CRM or database kind of solution that gives you the tools for marketing, sales, content management, operations, and customer service. So the full kitchen sink. Personally, I'm a huge fan of HubSpot, and I actually use it every day to manage my own volunteer program here at TechSoup. Today's webinar is going to share some insights into how HubSpot's all-in-one suite can help your nonprofit save time, money, and work just a little bit more efficiently. My name is Eli, and I'm a community manager at TechSoup, and today I'll be your event producer, which means I'll be here to manage the Q&A at the end of the event. Before we get started, let's go over how you can engage with us during the webinar. Next slide. So there's just a couple things you need to know. One, you're going to have lots of questions. Please use the Q&A feature, and you'll find that as one of the buttons here at the bottom in Zoom. Also, closed captioning is available. You'll see there's a button again in the bottom with a big CC, and you can just click that to turn on captioning in case you want some assistance just figuring out what we're saying, but we'll try and talk slow and clearly. And finally, don't stress about taking notes. We will send you an email in the next couple of days with the replay, with slides, resources, and some key links. So we've got you covered there. And with that, I'm going to throw us over to our panelists. Next slide, please. So today we've got two presenters. We've got Kyle Barkins, who is the co-founder of Tap Network and a big fan and advocate of the work we do at TechSoup. We're really happy to work with them. And I've got my colleague, Nick Finn, who is a senior director at TechSoup and leads many of our marketing initiatives. And so with that, over to you, boys.
Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar on HubSpot. My name is Nick Finn. I'm a senior director at TechSoup, coming to you live from what is today a nice and sunny Oakland after we've had just weeks and weeks and weeks of rain. But I know everybody across the country is struggling with their own weather issues right now. Today, Kyle and I want to bring forward to you some of the great ways that TechSoup specifically uses HubSpot and use TechSoup as a bit of a case example to explore what are the functionalities within HubSpot that we use the most. Why do we use those functionalities the most? And hopefully give those of you on the webinar today some more lines of inquiry to think about if you're considering moving to HubSpot, or you're just looking at the marketplace, thinking about maybe you want a different platform. What is it that HubSpot could really do for you? And to extend that a little bit, one of the reasons I'm really psyched about having Kyle on this call today is that Tap Network is a partner with TechSoup and helps us in our day-to-day usage, administration, and management of HubSpot. HubSpot is a very interesting tool in the sense that on the surface, it can be a very easy thing to use, but it's also got great depth. You can go very far into this platform, and it has a lot of power. And what Kyle and Tap Network help us do is really get into the deeper levels of HubSpot and work with its full functionality and full power. Kyle has years and years and years of HubSpot experience. So he's going to jump in and answer some questions that folks have and make sure that I don't miss any important points as I try to pour through the slideshow today and keep things on pace. We're going to aim for 45 minutes today. I know that everybody has busy lives. We don't need to spend a whole full hour and just leave you just in time for your next meeting. So we'll try to keep this to that 45-minute mark. Again, as Eli said, if you do have questions, please use that Q&A function in the bottom of the Zoom toolbar. Right, so let's get into it with HubSpot. start first with like the big picture of like, what does HubSpot do? And I will say that one of the first things that I want to really call out here is so many of the web technologies nonprofits use are actually really designed for the business and for-profit world. And nonprofits end up hacking these systems really to achieve our own goals, which are a little bit different. And so part of what I want to do here is offer some alternative wording so that you don't just get confused by a very sales-oriented discussion around HubSpot, because HubSpot's initial use case, what it was designed for, was really as a sales and marketing tool. But as I say, over time, TechSoup has really come to understand that it's a wonderful tool for nonprofits to work with as well. But there are 5 essential pieces of HubSpot that we rely on. There's contact management, which is human beings. There's lead management, which is human beings, but who we know are specifically interested in something that we're talking about. There's email management, of course, the dominant digital communications platform that we really use to talk to people out there in the real world is email. There's a file and document sharing element of HubSpot where you can deliver things to these leads and contacts that you want to speak with. And then, of course, on the back end, there's reporting and analytics to help you understand, are your strategies successful? What's going on with the engagement around your use of HubSpot? And there's many more functionalities that we're going to talk about today, but these are the main 5 things to really think about as the platform as a whole, right? As the name of the product itself talks about, HubSpot is a hub. It is a place where you can link in and attach lots of different platforms that folks are using. And these integrations are a really important piece of how HubSpot can be really helpful. I'm going to invite Kyle in to comment in particular on the integrations, because it really is a very powerful part of HubSpot.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, wherever you're dialing in from. Yeah, as Nick said, like one of the real powerful things about HubSpot is how it can really live at the center of everything else you're doing. So we'll talk a lot about today about the things that HubSpot can do. So you guys might see it replace some tools that you might have currently, or be tools that you've been looking for in the past. But it also works really well with tools that you currently have in place. So if you think about, maybe you're using QuickBooks to track donations or to track payments throughout there, or you're using DocuSign to get documents signed. You're hosting webinars. Anybody on this webinar today has actually been touched by and brought in through HubSpot at some point, whether you saw it on a blog or received it through an email or signed up for the webinar or got the reminder. All of that was either HubSpot or tied into HubSpot in some ways. And then there's also, a very flexible API as well. So if if you have a system that can communicate externally and doesn't integrate with HubSpot out of the box, there's a good chance that, something quickly can be developed to tie those things in. So if you're, getting donors or volunteers through a third-party system, and you want to make sure that they're tracked through HubSpot and we can stay up to date with them, there's likely an integration out there. It might integrate right out of the box, or it can be built to pull that in over time.
So I promise that's the deepest, most technical part of this entire webinar. So if you're a person who right now is going, APIs, integrations, more than I know about, don't worry. You're not in the wrong place. You're in the right place. But if you're somebody who is already thinking about APIs and integrations, just want to call out for you on the front end here, as you probably already know, HubSpot has a ton of that capability. And for sure at TechSoup, we use that. And so if that's part of your decision-making process about a new platform, know that it's got a very robust set of integrations and capabilities. All right, so moving forward, I want to briefly touch on the idea of what is a marketing funnel? And again, we're going to make this really quick, but nonprofits are different than businesses, and HubSpot and business-oriented marketing and sales platforms think of things in terms of a funnel. Most of us on this call probably know what that funnel really is. You start at the top with like large groups of people, and what you're trying to do is bring that to a smaller subset until you have a group of people who are very interested in what you do. They want to engage with your nonprofit, maybe as a volunteer, maybe as a donor, maybe as somebody who could use the services your nonprofit provides. But the idea of the funnel is to start with that big group, and how do you find that smaller group and all the things that happen in between, right? So you're attracting at the top of the funnel, and then at the bottom of the funnel, you're activating and identifying people. And so the first goal of that funnel is attract more supporters, right? And the HubSpot tools that you do that with are right here. The blogs, of course, the blog posts are, for TechSoup, one of the major ways that we do this, but they're not the only way. Content downloads, again, the sharing of documents. SEO is simply making sure that when you do stuff in HubSpot that lives on a website, it's optimized for search engines, so it's findable. Your emails, your newsletters, landing pages, and social media, all of this is to attract your supporters, right? Then you go into a more detailed effort to really try to identify what specific people are interested in. And you can do things like quizzes or surveys. You can share educational resources. You can do webinars like we're doing today. You can manage events and other downloads. And then you try to take those things and really just deepen your engagement with the folks that you're already talking to. And there's a bunch of different tools that you would use to do that. Again, workflows, audience segmentation, testimonials, webinars, white papers, emails, personalization works throughout HubSpot. All of these are digital strategies and elements of marketing campaigns. And so if you're thinking about some of these things, I just want you to see that they are part of what you can use in HubSpot and are available to you if you're thinking about things in that strictly funnel marketing way. And then on the back end, as I said, there's reporting and analytics within HubSpot to help you really understand how is your campaign doing. Now, we've gone through like the top end pitch around HubSpot, right? What I want to spend the rest of our time doing today, I think, actually, is the more detailed piece of like, how exactly does TechSoup use HubSpot? I use HubSpot every day in my work. The people who work in the marketing department at TechSoup, we all use HubSpot every day. And so rather than just present you with, a lot of the marketing hype around it, I also want to show you on the back end, what is it that we do with it? Demonstrate it a little bit to help you really get more of a hands-on, eyes-on view of like how HubSpot actually works. So let's talk first about the HubSpot CRM. It's the contact relationship management database. Sometimes we call that a constituent or customer relationship management database. But this is the database that holds the people you are communicating with. And they can be from all kinds of different walks of life. As I already mentioned, these could be donors. They could be clients, people who consume the services that your nonprofit provides. They could be other service providers who work with you. They could be broad supporters, or a host of other different universes of people, because with across the US alone, more than 250,000 nonprofits work with the TechSoup catalog. And believe me, their missions and the groups of people they work with are as diverse as that number would suggest. But in HubSpot, you can bring all of that together into one contact database. You can tag people so like, what is this person versus what is that person? So for instance, if they are a donor, you could create a unique field within HubSpot that says, hey, what donation amount has this person given? And then you would be able to run queries and say, build a universe in your CRM of like, show me everyone who's made a donation to our nonprofit of more than $100 within the past year. It's a simple example, but that's what the CRM is about. It's how you segment, organize, and see all the human beings that you're actually interacting with. Unsubscribes, I'm going to talk about here, although it's really part of the email stack as well. But as you have folks in that CRM, some of them are going to unsubscribe from emails that you send. HubSpot processes that stuff automatically. You don't even need to worry about it. So you can't accidentally start sending email to these folks who've unsubscribed. And that sounds like a simple thing, but honestly, especially for very small nonprofits who are trying to manage lots of different things all the time and wear many hats, it's just helpful to know from the start that like you don't even need to worry about that part of it. And finally, as I said, the segmentation and automation, that is like organizing these groups of people into different segments and then maybe setting up automatic communications with them. We'll talk about that, but not too deeply. These are all made possible within the HubSpot CRM. And so that's great. HubSpot CRM, who wouldn't be excited about that? But then the next obvious question is like, how do you get your people in there? And so the first demo that I actually wanted to share with you is how I do that, because part of my job every week is to make sure that I'm updating HubSpot with the latest set of contacts and nonprofits who've joined TechSoup in the past week, right? We want to communicate with these nonprofits. So how do I get them into HubSpot? There's a very robust and helpful import process that I'm going to just walk through in a couple of steps here. I'm not going to do the actual import. I'm just going to show you the screenshots. But I think this is important to share because it takes some questions right off the table immediately about like, can I do it this way? Can I do it that way? How would I bring my contacts in? So you start with here, I'm signed into HubSpot, and in the top left, you have a contacts dropdown in that HubSpot menu, right? You can see like the total number of contacts that we have right now. And you start with this import button, no surprise there. And that import button allows you to bring your contacts into the HubSpot database. And you can do that directly from an Excel spreadsheet or a CSV, right? So you start that import by just clicking that button, right? And then HubSpot walks you through a set of steps asking you, what do you want to import? And here is an interesting thing already. Are you importing a list of people you want to talk to? Or are you importing an opt-out list of people that you should not be talking to? For instance, if you're migrating from another email platform and you've accumulated a lot of unsubscribes in that email platform, you can't just resubscribe them by moving email platforms. It's not ethical. You don't want to do that. You want to upload it here as an opt-out list saying, no, these people have unsubscribed. We want to make sure we continue to not talk to them. Then HubSpot can queue you with whether or not you're uploading one single file or multiple files at a time. Both ways work, obviously, but you could do it multiple files. I do it one at a time. And then HubSpot asks, like, how many objects are you going to import to? And right now on this webinar, you're asking, what the heck is an object? Why does that matter? So let's touch on that and talk about it. The information contained in HubSpot is divided up into objects. These objects are tables or databases, to think of it that way. They all relate to each other, but they're specific as well. The three that we work with at TechSoup the most are companies, contacts, and deals. Now, remember how I was talking about we hack commercial stuff to make it work for nonprofits, and we all do that. This is a great example of how some of that terminology gets a little funky. Like HubSpot calls it companies, but at TechSoup, what we're talking to is nonprofits. So this companies object here is what contains the data about the nonprofits that we serve. The contacts, pretty self-explanatory. That's the human beings. And then the deals, well, these are transactions. These are simply people did something with us. And usually what we're talking about is that they've used the catalog of various nonprofit offers that TechSoup makes available, right? So I'm able to import all three kinds of data up into HubSpot. And that matters because then I can start building linkages between them. And just one example would be like, show me all the human beings, contacts, who worked for, let's say, nonprofits in the state of New York, just throwing that out randomly, who have engaged with us and used the catalog. Now, that's a very powerful segment to be talking to suddenly. And in your specific nonprofit's example, that segment could look like something very different. Perhaps you're just looking at a local community. Maybe the kind of deal or engagement you're thinking about is different. But in the back end of HubSpot, these are kind of core things to know, that this is how the data is structured. And so if you have a complex environment and you're just not really sure how you would bring that data set into HubSpot, hopefully this just gives a little more clarity to how that stuff is structured and why you would want to think about it that way. That's as deep and technical as I'm going to go into that piece of it. There's certainly endless information online and that we can also share through chat and Q&A. But let's keep going here. Now, once I've said, okay, I'm going to import this file of contacts, the last step is, how do I make sure that the fields I'm importing get matched to the right fields in the CRM? And this is a dialog screen that HubSpot shows you. It's the next screen in that process where you can make those decisions right then and there and make sure that everything is flowing into the right fields in HubSpot. If you've worked with a database before for a nonprofit that's a CRM, you know that how to organize those data fields is just like a really difficult process sometimes. Lots of questions have to be answered around how clean is your data? What does it really mean? HubSpot makes it very easy for you to manage all of that as you bring it into the interface in the first place. And so I have always found that this field matching screen is a very helpful way to quickly orient around what data you're bringing in and where should it live within the CRM. All right. So
sorry, Nick. Sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
One thing to that too, because I've seen some of these questions come through, and I know it's a common question, especially when nonprofits are moving from other systems or pulling in multiple spreadsheets from other places. One of their questions is like deduplication. So making sure that we don't have the same emails going in there multiple times. HubSpot will deduplicate by email for you. But what's nice about like the imports and the list that Nick's going through is you can import lists. Let's say you have an event last year and an event this year, and you want to be able to see who attended both of those events. Import those lists into HubSpot, and you can create like an overlap list and say, show me everyone who attended my fundraising event in the summer of 2021 and summer of 2022, and didn't in 2023 or did in 2023 as it comes up. So it does a lot of actual data cleanup for you kind of automatically.
Yeah, that's a really good point and great intro to our next section, specifically on email, because that actually is something that I have also found over time is really helpful. Working on the web in digital marketing, talking to people, the whole idea of how you organize email and what is a good database and what is a bad database, it has evolved so quickly over time. I can certainly remember 10, 15 years ago when we were trying to set up email marketing programs. And one of the biggest headaches of all was, how do I make sure I don't send the same email to the same person 6 times in one day by accident, right? And believe me, that happened. There's probably people on this call who had that problem happen. HubSpot dedupes those email addresses automatically, as Kyle was just saying. And so in the CRM, that email address will only appear one time. If you add that email address to an email 6 times to send it today, HubSpot's only going to send that email once. So again, that's a great relief, sort of like unsubscribes. We don't have to worry about that stuff anymore. We can spend more of our mental energy focused on other things that are more important, like how am I going to find some new people to talk to this week? Or what is it that they're really interested in hearing from me, rather than the technical pieces of like, oh, I got to make sure my unsubscribes are suppressed. I got to make sure I've deduped all the email addresses. HubSpot has that stuff sorted in the background, so you don't have to think about it a whole lot. So we do a tremendous amount of email marketing through HubSpot. I imagine there's plenty of people on this call today who say, yes, Nick, possibly too much. We get a lot of email from TechSoup, and we do send a lot of email. It's true. We try to keep it at a manageable level, but we do it all through HubSpot. And some things that I really think are great features of the HubSpot email system are it has a drag and drop functionality to it, where you can just drag modules in, excuse me, and build out what your email looks like. You're building it and testing it and sending it all from one place, which is really great, because it just, again, being spread across multiple platforms makes things harder. It makes things slower. A/B testing is a essential feature of HubSpot email. So it could be a very simple thing, like you're just testing a subject line and you want to see how that works, or you can get super complex. Again, I'm not going to go crazy technical on that right now in this webinar, but there are some deep capabilities within the email tool where you could do a lot of testing if you wanted to do that. Some really helpful other functionalities are like, you can very easily clone emails, retool it, and send it to a different group. Like, that's basically an essential function of the email marketing track. And then again, there's all sorts of analytics and back-end performance metrics that you can look at to determine whether or not your email is working the way you want it to. I can tell you these days, what we tend to focus on most is how many emails we delivered. We don't look a lot anymore at the open rate. And some of you on the call who are closer to this kind of stuff know that once Apple made changes to their handling of open tracking pixels a year ago, that really has thrown a bit of a curveball into how to look at open rates. So we don't look at that a whole lot, but perhaps the most important email engagement metric really is clicks. And if you're not monitoring that in your email right now, you should be. That's absolutely what you should be looking at, is the clicks on this, because that is the fundamental gauge of engagement and performance. And of course, yeah, HubSpot has that stuff just baked in, so you can see it very easily. This is an example of the marketing email interface in HubSpot. As you can see, we've got a whole bunch of email names here on the left-hand side. You can see the subject line right here. And you see some interesting code in these subject lines that are worth calling out. So for instance, here in this very first one, we used a personalization token in the subject line so that we can address people by their name. If that's data that we have. That's actually a very important part of how modern digital marketing needs to work. The more you're able to personalize your campaigns, not just with name, by the way, it could be by the name of the nonprofit, for instance. The more you're able to personalize this stuff, the more people understand that you're speaking to them directly, that this isn't just some crazy giant spam email. And so that's an important piece, is personalization, and you can do that all very easily. And that's what that token looks like right there. That's what you're seeing. And so in terms of email marketing, I have found HubSpot, and I've used a lot of platforms over time, to just be one of the easiest to use, and yet at the same time, most powerful. Like, they really do a great job of holding that line between, like, how can I use this easily, but also do all the things that I might eventually want to do. All right. And then, of course, here's an example of one of the emails that comes through the system. And, there's view and browser links. We add these images, the writing, and this button here at the bottom is called a CTA. We'll mention that a little bit more further down. But, there's an example of one of the emails that we just sent straight through HubSpot. All right. Another place that we use HubSpot a ton is we build landing pages with it. What's a landing page? Yeah, it varies from organization to organization. If you were working, for instance, in a large corporate environment, a landing page is really it's the sales pitch for a product, right? And you send an email to somebody, they click on that email, then they go to a landing page, and the landing page is where they get the information that they need to really take their action and then move on to whatever the next step. But for us in the nonprofit world, landing pages are kind of different. They are more just straight up information about a specific thing that we want to communicate about. So for instance, let's say we have a series of courses coming up that are free entry-level courses on skills for people who need to know more about Excel, right? We could build a landing page that talks about those specific courses. And the reason this landing page functionality helps is because in many cases, the website architecture that nonprofits work with, and we're not very different in this regard, it can be very complex and actually hard to build the on-the-fly customized things that you really think everybody ought to be able to make, right? HubSpot, because it is designed to be an easy-to-use interface, lets you do this easily and quickly without actually asking the development team or the technical team that your nonprofit to take up the work of building out this page. It lets your marketing and communications people just do it themselves. And so again, that makes things faster, more efficient, and I think easier. Go ahead, Kyle.
All right, I hate to interrupt you, but I'll jump in here too, because we get this question quite often. A lot of times people will have a website that was built by someone else and they're not really good at keeping it up to date, or it's just very good brochure style and they're not ready to add to that or able to add to that on their own. HubSpot with the landing pages gives you the opportunity to, one, as Nick was saying, quickly spin something up on your own without having too much technical knowledge or having to be a developer, and it'll keep it on brand. It'll match all your styling once it's set up that way. But two, it's also great for one-off events. So especially for smaller organizations where they don't need to create a bunch of different pages on their website, they could use a landing page or a series of landing pages to drive someone to a fundraiser or drive someone to an annual event that they host, and then use that, track all that through HubSpot, see how well that performed, use all the tools that Nick was talking about earlier. And then next year when that thing comes up, you just replicate that landing page or update it. So it really limits the amount of work you have to put in and time you have to spend and technical understanding you really need to be able to spin things up quickly and run those campaigns.
Exactly right on point. Yep. Ease of use, fundamental and very helpful. Similar to the email construction process, you can use drag and drop functionality to build those out. There's A/B testing available on these pages if you want to do that. You can embed forms, which is a native part of the HubSpot platform. And you can also build dynamic content into these pages. So again, they go deep if you want to get that deep, but at the surface, they're also just extremely helpful because you can set them up and get them going quickly. And then, of course, another key thing is there's so much work sometimes coordinating graphics across platforms. You've got one graphic in your website, you've got a different one in your email. When you do this all with HubSpot, you're uploading these graphics into HubSpot, and then they're reusable in other parts of HubSpot. So you have an email that uses this image. Oh, we can just reuse this image on the landing page as well. And it's very easy to do that. And so here again is a view of what the landing page interface looks like within HubSpot. And as you can see, we've got a whole load of different landing pages in progress. And I'll call out one that's special, near and dear to my heart, which is coming up soon. It's the GrantStation $99 offer. It's one of those emails that you hear about twice a year. TechSoup's GrantStation promo is coming up in February of this year. It's the 14th and the 15th. It's $99 for a full 1-year subscription to GrantStation. But I'm sharing it here because it's an example of a landing page that we built with HubSpot, right? And, I think looks pretty good. And took us very little time to put together. Obviously, we had to do a lot of talking about what were the words on there, what was the strategy behind it. But from an implementation perspective, super easy to put this page together. Another place that we use HubSpot all the time, and in fact, one of the original reasons that we wanted to look at it as a platform is the blog. And so in HubSpot's more commercial iteration, a blog is a way to bring in traffic at the top of the funnel, get people who might be a little bit interested in stuff and start to pull them in and see what they are interested in doing with you. At TechSoup, our blog is very much case examples of nonprofits who've successfully used some tech idea to do something. And then the other thing would be like tips and tricks and best practices around usage of different tools. And then sometimes it can be just like new product alerts. Anyway, all of that is hosted on the HubSpot blog. We post to the blog almost every day at this point in time. All of that is hosted in HubSpot. So again, the graphics that we use in emails and blog posts and landing pages, all interchangeable between them because they're all in that platform already. Just like landing pages, the blog can be integrated into your website. And again, it gives you this very easy way to put your content up without asking your technical or development teams to pick up the work of doing that. And so here's a back-end look at the blog functionality in HubSpot itself. You can see here already we've got several posts that have all been published in January. By now this view should be starting to feel a little bit familiar. Like you can just see this stuff is organized into a list version. You can click on any of these and go into the blog post. You could make an edit and publish that out live. You could clone the blog post and do something different with it. All sorts of opportunities to be functional there. And then if you go to the TechSoup site and you go to resources here, I think it's resources or community has the blog link underneath it. I'm embarrassed that I can't tell you off the top of my head which one it is, and it's not a live page, so I can't click on it. But this is what the blog itself looks like, right? And we've styled this ourselves. We've built this out. Doesn't have to look like this. Could look like something else, but this is how TechSoup does it. So I know that we're coming down to the last 5 minutes here. So there are a couple of other, three other terms that I want to just refloat back out because some folks will be thinking about this, although not everybody. And if you're not, it's fine. HubSpot has something called workflows. Workflows are automation. I know that for some folks working at nonprofits right now, automation is very far away from what you're thinking about. But for some other folks, automation actually is something that you're actively thinking about. HubSpot has that. And to put it in simple terms, this automation is really how you do pull those objects together that I was mentioning earlier. Remember the companies, or for us nonprofits, the contacts, the human beings, and then deals, the transactions they've engaged with. How do you pull those together and do an automation? And so to pull up what Kyle was just talking about earlier with a landing page, trying to get somebody to a fundraiser, an automation might be that if somebody comes to the landing page and they look around and they give their email address and then they go away and nothing happens, you can set up an automation that says, hey, 3 days after that happened, I want you to send a reminder email to this person that they took that action and that if they want to take this further, they might want to read this blog, or they might want to check out this specific resource online. So automation is very much just how do we trigger a communication to people instead of requiring that it always be done manually all the time, because that means it doesn't happen a lot of the time because there's only so much staff time to do things, right? Another function that is important to call out are the forms in HubSpot. Again, on the surface, super easy to use. As you go deep, very, very powerful. And you can do a lot of things with forms, but the main thing is you can capture information. For instance, if you are talking to potential clients and you need to capture what state they're in or a particular line of inquiry that they have, you can ask them for this information in forms, and then the forms automatically port that into your CRM. So you've captured that information and now you have it. The final thing to mention here is a CTA. It's a call to action. It's the button, right? We're used to seeing these buttons in emails where you click here, and that's how you get to the next step in whatever the user journey is that this person has been, that they've been asked to take. Those buttons are an important part of how HubSpot works because they let you track engagement, but they also, how would I say this? They also give people a very clear, like, this is the thing you need to do next, right? And usually we'll use a CTA button and also have a web, just an inline text link there so people can click on both. But those CTAs are another important part of how HubSpot functions. So I know this has been a lot of content and information, thanks everybody who's chatting away and asking questions on the back end here and providing solutions and answers. We're at 10:44. And so the last thing I do want to call out is, like, obviously HubSpot is also available to nonprofits through a TechSoup validation. And I think you've got the link for that already somewhere in the chat here. But the core offer from HubSpot for nonprofits is 40% off. There are, with most of these platforms, there are varying levels of the product, depending on what you think you need. And of course, the more you need and the more sophisticated implementation you need, the more expensive those versions are. So you have to think about that kind of thing when you're looking at the platform. But TechSoup is pretty uniquely qualified and positioned to help nonprofits who want to work with HubSpot. Again, because we do it ourselves, we totally get how it's powerful, and also where there are hiccups. As I mentioned also, because we have this great relationship with Tap and Kyle, we can go deeper into the technical end of how to problem solve stuff in HubSpot. And then finally, just as a nonprofit ourselves in the sphere, and that's what TechSoup is, by the way, if you did not know, we are a 501c3 nonprofit as well, right? So we understand what it means to be a nonprofit, what it means to do more with less, so to speak, and how to get creative with these tools. So I want to thank everybody for joining the webinar today. It's been a pleasure. And again, I know so much of the action on these things is really in that chat and Q&A section. So if you haven't already dropped your final question there, I encourage you to do so. And as Eli said, we'll share an email out. It will come from HubSpot within a day or two that will have links that you need. It'll have a copy or a link to the actual webinar today. And I think a couple of additional resources in there and should give you what you need. And I hope this is helpful. Again, appreciate all your time. And with that, I will call it a day. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kyle and Nick. There is 1 million questions. We're not going to get to all of them, unfortunately, but we're going to go fast and efficient and make sure we address as many as we can. Also, be sure to go into the Q&A and check the answered subtab. Kyle has been very helpfully adding answers there, but I'm going to repeat some of those for those who maybe missed it. So let's just start off really high level. Does HubSpot need to be downloaded? Like, is it a piece of desktop software? And do I need to put some special code on my website to make it work?
Sorry, I was on mute. So yeah, so you can get very deeply integrated with HubSpot. So you can like embed forms. You can do, as we mentioned earlier, like build a landing page. We actually don't live on HubSpot, but just to get HubSpot to set up and start tracking within your website. So tracking existing forms on there, seeing who's coming to your website, seeing who's revisiting your website, and really to get it going that way. It's a very simple embed. So it's just as easy as adding something like Google Analytics to your website. And if you have like a WordPress website, they have plugins that are built by HubSpot, supported by HubSpot, that makes it even easier to get it integrated for you.
Awesome. Here's another question. We have some people coming in who aren't in the US. Is this HubSpot offer with TechSoup available in other countries? And if so, where?
Was that an internal question for Nick Finn, or can I jump on that too?
Take it.
Cool. Yeah, HubSpot's supported in across the globe really, but I know the HubSpot discount is right at this time just for 501c3 organizations. Is that correct, Nick?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah, and it looks like right now the offer is available in the US, Canada, Australia, and I believe the UK. That's where the discount offer in partnership with TechSoup is currently available. So here's another question around deduping databases. So we talked a little bit about emails will automatically get deduped if someone uses the same email. But what if they don't? What if we have someone with two different emails? Can I just manually merge and consolidate two email addresses into one person?
You certainly can. So if for example, that there's two Nick Finns in there, but they're the same Nick Finn, you can just go to the one record and merge that one with the other one. You can merge multiple together. But HubSpot has a built-in deduplication tool, which will deduplicate things like companies, deals, and contacts. And what it does is it looks for similar things. So it'll automatically deduplicate by the same email. So if you come in there twice, it's going to know you're the same person, pull you together. But if you have, in that example, let's say Nick Finn came in, he filled it out with his Gmail address and with his TechSoup address, and most of the information, some key things were the same. HubSpot's going to know that and say, we think we found a match for this. And then they have a bulk deduplication tool where you can sort of see these things and make those decisions. And it'll let you pick, like, okay, this is the single source of truth. Let's merge Nick Finn's things to this. And with cookie tracking, with that installed tracking code, next time Nick comes back from one of those different email addresses, it'll start pulling all of his activity into that same record.
Awesome. Here's a question around a really common nonprofit use case, which is case management, especially for service organizations. Is there a way to use the HubSpot tools to manage like a case? So say you are a homeless organization working with the unhoused, and you need to sort of track someone's progress as you work with them.
Yes. Oh,
Go ahead, Kyle.
Yes, we use it for a number in situations like that. And you can do that in many different ways. So there's the deals tool, which works right out of the box. You don't need to have anything special, any special add-ons for this. You could set up a case as a deal and then track that deal or that case through different stages. So sort of manage it like you would like any kind of project management tool, or anything in like a pipeline or stage that way. There's also tickets through like HubSpot service platform, which works very much the same way. So you can have different stages of tickets, and then you can collaborate with people internally on either one of those. It's just a matter of like what works best for your use case.
Right. So there's a couple different models you could take, but yeah, people are currently working on that. I've got a couple questions coming in here from the landing pages discussion we had. The first one is, how does HubSpot interact with the Google Analytics we are already quite familiar with at many of our organizations?
So it out of the box integrates directly with Google Analytics. You just drop in your ID, your tracking ID in the back end of HubSpot. But then you can get as granular as you need to there. So if you want to track, the blog separately from the landing pages or from emails, the email landing pages or something like that, you can set that up in Google Analytics as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so if I have like a WordPress site with both my Google Analytics and my WordPress code on it, or sorry, my HubSpot code, I'm not going to create some kind of weird double tracking, counting analytics nightmare, am I?
No, you shouldn't. I mean, you certainly can if it's set up incorrectly, but like I said, out of the box, it doesn't have that issue. It knows it doesn't set up this as like a referring domain. It tracks it all to the root domain.
I've got an interesting question here coming from Katie, which is, can you accept credit card payments on these landing pages?
You can, and it also works well. I mean, that would be kind of like building your own shopping cart of sorts on HubSpot, but it also integrates with other shopping carts like WooCommerce. I think I mentioned this, like GiveButter. It has direct integrations with like Stripe and PayPal as well. But HubSpot does have a payments platform that I actually posted a link to in the Q&A, and I can send it in the chat as well.
Awesome. Let's go into the email section we had. So we've got a question here from Tanya saying, if someone bounces in the system, but then they later on say, actually, I want to be back in the email system, how do you enable someone within HubSpot?
Oh, great question. So bounce meaning that they have unsubscribed themselves. I'll
So
assume
it could
that's
be
what we
either
mean.
they had
Yeah.
a bad email address and it bounced
Yeah.
for a while, but then fixed itself, or potentially they did unsubscribe, but then they thought better of it.
So two cases there, like the bouncing, HubSpot does monitor that stuff. And at a certain point in time, if there are too many hard bounces on an address, they'll just stop. HubSpot will stop sending to that address, but it doesn't do that immediately. So it'll watch for a little bit. On unsubscribes though, the first thing is you cannot manually unsubscribe someone. That's really important, because that's how HubSpot makes sure that we don't accidentally email a bunch of people that have unsubscribed. But if a user wants to resubscribe, they essentially can go to HubSpot and do that themselves. It's triggered by them entering information in a form, and HubSpot will do a pop-up that says, hey, it looks like you're actually unsubscribed from HubSpot emails. Would you like to resubscribe to them?
Right. So that actually becomes fairly automated, which is nice.
You have to engage, you have to, sorry, not engage. You have to activate that feature, right? But it does happen.
Cool. I've got another question here from Caleb, and I think we kind of touched on parts of this, which is through HubSpot Mail, can you tell if an email was first opened and then the second part like clicked on or engaged with?
Yes, you can. Again, reiterating the caution around opens because of Apple's new privacy practices. It's much harder to really understand consistently what those opens are, but HubSpot does let you see whether it was opened and whether it was also clicked, and does that both at a macro and micro scale. So you could look at whether a specific user did that, or you could look at just the total users who did that on a particular email.
Right. Super helpful. And so, of course, using that, then you could actually set up automations and do all kinds of magic through the workflows.
Exactly. Yep. So
I've got a question here from Donna and several others, which is around the common use case of managing fundraising, especially specifically in this case, grants. So like sort of the more, major gift style donations. What is the recommended way to manage that in HubSpot, since it uses, as we talked about, different language?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to give a bit of an incomplete answer, unfortunately, because it depends on an awful lot of things. And mainly what it depends on is the exact nature of your relationship with those donors already. And how often do you expect them to hear from you? But in the big picture, what I would say is using HubSpot email to speak with those donors is totally appropriate, as long as those donors have opted in to receiving email from your organization. And that's a really important part. HubSpot does not want people to just randomly upload lists that they have bought, purchased, rented, or found underneath the couch and then just start sending people email, right? That is absolutely not an ethical practice and not a supported use of HubSpot. So as long as your donors are expecting to hear from you, then it's an appropriate tool to use. And then, but to go deeper on like, how should you do that? It really just, it depends an awful lot on what your unique situation is.
Well, that might be a bit of a leading question. What if I needed a bit of support in digging into determining the best way of modeling my data in HubSpot? Who should I turn to?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, there's first, I would say, honestly, start with Google, right? Google that, get into the topic, start to understand what that at least gets you. And then if you wanted to engage in further understanding, you know, that's when you can come to TechSoup and you can talk to our customer service folks, and they can start getting you in the right direction. And of course, like the links that we share in the email after this webinar should help as well.
Awesome. We have room for one last thorny question, which is how do we deal with households? A very common fundraising database model in the nonprofit world. How do you bring that idea into HubSpot?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm a guy who's done plenty of direct mail in my time, so I do know what you're talking about there. Like off the top of my head, I think what I would say is that we don't really do much householding in email. You could, for instance, look at if there were email addresses registered to the same street address. You could try to look at that, but for the most part, because email addresses are unique to a person versus a street address, that's how they are sent and that's how they are received. But again, I think the particulars of your relationship with your donors also play a big role in how you might want to think about it. But I would say householding is not something that we have, I think, done at all with HubSpot, and not a use case that I think of much anymore.
Right. But yeah, I would definitely say do some Googling, and Kyle, go for it.
Yeah, we've done that a couple of times actually. The way that two ways we accomplish that, one is depending on how granular you want to get, we can do it through companies. But we also do it through deals. So we can associate multiple people in the same household to one deal. So the deal would be the household. And then you can set up automation or just send emails just to those household, just to everyone in that household. So let's say Eli, Nick, and I were all part of the TechSoup household instead of the TechSoup company. We can set up emails or lists that say, you know, send it to everyone in the TechSoup company.
Right. Interesting. Well, I use actually a similar idea for my own volunteer management, where instead of households, I have like chapters or groups. And again, we sort of associate those multiple people into that one space. So we are out of time. I'm grateful for everyone who has been here with us today. Be sure to fill out the survey. It will also automatically pop up when you close the Zoom. And we will, of course, share the video, the slides, and all the resources afterwards. And I'm also going to try and capture some of the Q&A and make sure we put that up onto the TechSoup forum so we can share that resource that Kyle's been building for us as well. So with that, super grateful to our expert presenters here, Nick and Kyle, and have a lovely afternoon, evening, morning, no matter where you are. See you all.